everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of How Ambition Uses Ambition. We have everyone coming in right now, so I'll go ahead and just do some intros before we kick off the content. I am Mary Foster, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Ambition. And with me, I have Chris, who is the Head of Sales Development, and Brian, who is co-founder at Ambition.
Hey, everyone.
All right, people are still coming in a little bit, but we'll go ahead and kick it off. So this episode this month is all about aggregating your data into an executive summary or scoreboard view. So what we're going to talk about are the KPIs that we use at Ambition and how we track with our own product, and then also how we celebrate in real time. And we'll give you a real look at like our actual scoreboards and what we're doing here. So the first thing I wanted to call out is for us, it's really important to not only look at aggregation of data. Sales is definitely like a numbers game. And CRMs are traditionally where people used to kind of measure their sales team. And CRMs are great at aggregating data, but there's no real-time component to it. And I think that that's probably a question we get a lot is like, what's the difference in using Ambition versus just managing out of a CRM? So I wanted to talk to you guys, Brian, Chris, about kind of how you would answer that for somebody.
Yeah, I can take it first. I think, and you know, someone who does end up spending time in both in our CRM as well as in Ambition. You know, one thing that they, like you said, I mean, we have all kinds of reports, and through the last 7 years, I can't even think of how many reports have come and gone as things changed and different, the things we wanted to measure changed. But what I always had to do is go refresh this report. I have to go into, Salesforce, find the right one. If I really wanted to like get any context of different rep performance vis-a-vis their targets or goals, I had to move that into like a spreadsheet. And so, you know, one of the things I think philosophically about Ambition is CRM is great for, you know, measuring what's happening with accounts and what's happening with an opportunity or what's happening with leads. It's very difficult to get any real-time or aggregate visibility into, you know, what's happening with the reps and how are a group of reps or a team of reps performing. And being able to always have that live, always have visibility into where we are and contextually where are we trying to go. That's a key for me, whether it's with our, you know, sales development, sales team, CSM team, anyone who we track KPIs on. I want to be able to really quickly see how they're doing. Are they going in the right direction? And how far are we from getting to where we want to be, a goal or an objective?
And I think too, with like remote reps now, Chris, and you can speak to this a little bit because we used to have everyone in what we called the Wolves Den in Chattanooga, RIP.
RIP the Den.
Missed that.
So tell me about kind of like how, if your use case kind of morphed when everyone went remote and how you felt like you could have that visibility or see kind of what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime you lose that visibility or just that, interaction with your reps, there's that, feeling of, I want to lean in really hard. I want all the data, right? And I think at some moments that can feel like Big Brother, micromanagement, which I know we'll kind of talk about here. And the great thing about Ambition is it's going to give me all the information I need. But then as opposed to a CRM, it's going to make it actionable for me. So I see that numbers are down. I can quickly spin up a competition. I can create a goal for the team. I can schedule a one-on-one check-in with a rep who might be veering off course. And so that's really how I've been tapping into the system now that we're all over the place. And it's hard to really get that pulse on what each rep is doing.
Chris, it's something that I've been saying a lot recently because we're finding that we're all remote and continue to be remote, is like the pulse. And I know Mary's going to talk about this. It's just hard to gauge that now. Like when you guys were in the Wolves Den, which is, I don't know, 20 feet from where I sit, like I could feel the pulse all the time, whether it was like you guys playing music, hear the chatter, and that sense is just gone now. Like we don't have that sensory connection. And I think, you being able to tap into those actionable steps really comes from you having a great pulse on it. Like you can do that. You can be an active, available coach and really changing the direction of the team because you're seeing it.
And I think that is the difference too, just, with the real time component, it is more of the pulse than just like the big number total that you get from like a CRM. And I know Chris uses those a lot, and we'll share some examples of exactly how we do it. And so Chris mentioned Big Brother. And so that's a big concern that a lot of people share. A lot of sales leaders actually are pretty sympathetic to their team. They don't want to feel like they're checking up negatively or using the data against somebody. And so one thing that we try to really do when we're looking at tracking metrics and KPIs in both like aggregate and real time is talk about like at the macro level, where are we at to the number? And at the micro level, where is each rep? Because it lets you see what's happening, but also celebrate, recognize, and coach. And then add in a real time component too. So there's 3 kind of ways to use the same metrics, but look at them differently to have like just a more 360 holistic view. So I wanted to give some examples. Like calls are a big activity metric. They let you know what's happening if your reps are actually working or what they're doing when they're at home on the couch. And so we look at the macro level calls by team. How many calls has the team made today? And we can compare it historically if we need to. Then we look by rep, who's leading on the leaderboard. And then in real time, the example that we use is when someone hits 75 dials for the day, we celebrate with a real time alert. And so you can do that really for every metric. Like there's same thing for meeting, the total counts, the leaderboards by rep, and then the real time alerts and pipeline as well. And so I just think that that's like a good framework for people to think about is like, how do they combine all of those things there? And so, of course, that means that there's different channels now too. So which of these probably stands out to you of what you use the most, Chris, when you're interacting with the data?
Yeah, I mean, I would say number one would be Slack. It's just that immediate, recognize or, alerts me when, something, really important happened on my team. And so that's number one. I think anytime that I'm sitting down with a rep, like in a coaching session, we're actually in the platform looking at that, one pane of glass of all of their performance metrics. So that's the other thing. I also have set up email alerts for myself. I think that's really important, especially if you're going to be out of the office for some reason. I just recently took some vacation, and I have alerts that go midday and at the end of the day, so that it lets me know, hey, are we veering off course on activity? Halfway through the day, I can give a little nudge to a rep. And then at the end of the day, I can get a recap of what happened today. So those are kind of a few that I use quite a bit.
I love the email call out, the unsung hero.
Yeah.
The channel I would never use. It's so funny because we're hearing the term right now a lot because so many teams are staying remote. Digital sellers. That's what you have, your remote reps or your digital sellers. And so I think a key to not only connecting your digital sellers together, but also so that everyone feels like they know what's happening is that omni-channel experience. So for some people, it's going to be email. For some people, it's going to be Slack. And I know there's people on here asking about Microsoft Teams, which is in development. And for some people, it's going to be just like a browser. So I think that that's really important to call out of like how we use our scoreboards across multiple different channels for different things.
One thing, Mary, I wanted to highlight, and I know we're going to dig into some of the specific scoreboards here in a minute, but when you were talking about like actual KPIs that we measure, one of the things I've been hearing a ton from people recently, and I think it's because they've lost that like, tangible sense of their team, but they've lost the link of like, okay, someone, hit the goal of 75 calls today, but did they set any meetings? But did any of their meetings convert to an op? But did any of those ops, get into a certain stage? And like, did they create X number of dollars of pipeline? And, a lot of folks, I think what I love about what our team does, and credit to Chris and how Mark and I think you guys manage the sales process and the pipeline generation process, is you've really strung those together in a way that makes sense to the team. So none of it's like busy work. None of it's like, hey, you just have to do this because this is how we work at Ambition. It's you do this because the data tells us if you do this many calls, you're going to have this many conversations. And if you have this many conversations, ideally you'll convert this many meetings. And if you have this many meetings with the right type of people, you should convert at this rate of pipeline. And I think that's like a thing that people have to get to, because if you're using certain tools, it's really difficult to string that together in one single place and say, you might be in Outreach or Sales Loft, you may be working on Gmail, you may be, just in Salesforce. And so you're not seeing, kind of like your full Apple Watch of like, am I doing all of the things? Am I converting at the right rate? Am I on course? And I wanted to highlight that and I'll talk about the omni-channel experience here in a second, but like, really telling that story and having your teams. I think what's great about sales development and our AEs, account executives here, they know it. They know like what I need to do, and if I do it, here's what we expect it to get to, and how that's going to impact their compensation really.
Yeah, I think sometimes people, and when we share our scoreboard here in a second, I think sometimes people are surprised because you can drown in the data, right? Ambition makes it really easy to track everything. It's a little bit overwhelming. And so I think sometimes people are really excited and they think that more is better when it comes to visibility. But in the examples that we're going to share, it's really about focus. It's visibility and focus to get to where we want to go, which I think is cool. Okay, so next slide after this, I think we actually show the scoreboards, I promise. But I did want to call out, a little bit, again, reminding everyone the micro, macro, and real time. And so some things for our SDR team, and this is the scoreboard we'll look at, meetings are obviously a big indicator for us for how things are going to go for the AE team. Like, we're going to look at inbound versus outbound sets. We do a little bit of team versus team, and you can slice that up in different time parameters, as well as then at the leaderboard. And then we have real-time alerts and historical performance. And we look at pipeline and qualified leads or opportunities. And then we also look at those activity metrics. And then we're not going to dive into the AE scoreboard, but I did want to share the actual things that we track, which are really probably similar: ACV, closed won revenue. We also look at pipeline and opportunities so that you can see how healthy it is by rep and by team, and then meetings held for the week, because it's really nice to see, what everyone's up to. It's that visibility, it's their version of activity. And so that's something we track as well. Okay, so this is the first look at the Wolves TV, and it's all about meeting set team by team. So Chris, I wanted to talk a little bit to call out that this view can track, the different time frames like you see here, but it's ranked leaderboard style by the month. And I think it's really cool to point out that, like, someone might be trailing on the year, and it's really hard to move up the leaderboard if you're ranking it by the year. And so this is something that you can show those multiple time frames, but you can also choose to rank it by any of these metrics that you want.
Right. Yeah. So important. And for us, my team is very transactional, so very activity based. So we focus on really looking at the metrics, day to day, the metrics that we have a lot of control over. Meeting set is one of those things. And so, so I really want my reps to be able to see this, how we're doing for the month, how they're trending for the quarter, the year. It gives us a lot of flexibility here with what we want to show. And as you mentioned at the top, it's so fun to be able to say, like, hey, we'll pull out the inbound and the outbound and kind of pit the two together, because it's kind of created a little bit of competition essentially between, sales and marketing on, who's going to win on meeting set for the month, right?
And I think we can all see who's winning on
Month's
Um,
not over yet, right?
Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the on our little mock-up of the phone here, the Carolina Panthers GIF, maybe the image there?
I think it's actually the Gamecocks. I think that's the the University of South Carolina, which is not my team, but it may be Joe's. Yeah, so I mean, this is how, Chris, you mentioned it before, and I find like right now specifically, I'm not going to say the catchphrase about what we're going through, but I find myself working in places I didn't used to work. Mary, you're talking about right now. I think you're in your living room. Like you're like, I don't have my dual monitor set up. This is different for me to run a webinar. We're all in that same deal. And so I actually feel like I know what's happening and I have a better sense of the quality of the types of pipeline and opportunities we're creating, as well as the performance of our reps, which I'm in all honesty, I'm a couple levels removed. Like I'm not managing day to day like Chris is, or I'm not coaching day to day like Mark is. But I can tell when Joe, for example, is having a great day because it's hitting Slack and it's hitting these email triggers that we've built. And so whether it's just his amount of activity, which is getting highlighted, like he may have set 3 inbound meetings this morning, or he may have done 75 calls today, or he could have created an opportunity that converted from a marketing lead. Those are giving me a ton of context all the time, whether I'm on my phone or my laptop at home with our kids or whatever, to how our team's performing and, kind of I would say like the cadence to which they're doing that. I'm getting a really good sense of, people who unfortunately I'm disconnected to right now and I don't get to see every day, but how they're performing and kind of how they're trending in their performance, which to me, it just puts me at ease. Like that's a weird way of saying it, but like I don't have to be like I'm gonna go figure out if Joe is doing well. I know because I'm seeing it, in real time and then multiple times a day via these alerts.
Yeah. And I think on the opposite, from the rep's perspective, it doesn't feel like you're creeping on them in a negative way. Like it's all about getting to the top of the scoreboard.
Well, you can see it from your snapshot too. Like the best part is, and I hope it doesn't get overused, but like our team reacting, the most fun that we have with these folks, whether they're, 5 miles away at their house in Chattanooga or they're in Buffalo, New York, is a great meeting gets set or someone hits a milestone and then the emojis come. There's a thread about it or people start, chatting about how did you convert this or how did you create this opportunity, and that kind of collaboration that we're able to foster, we're able to generate by having a point where folks are seeing that. It's awesome. And so I really care about making sure whenever something fires across, I'm interacting with it in some way, asking more about it, giving the rep a virtual high five, whatever it is. Like I want to make sure they feel recognized, not just like I'm seeing what they're doing. Like to your point, I don't have my thumb on them, but I appreciate the hard work that's going into it. And I see the effort that they're putting out there because of some of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we do feel really connected. Like I think, we're not seeing each other, but I feel super connected by like the gifts or the images that people choose for their alerts. Like I'm not a sports person, super obviously. But it's just fun. And there's a lot of Halloween themed ones right now. It's fun to talk a little bit of trash when something converts that everyone said wasn't very likely, and don't get your hopes up, and you see the alert come through. It feels so good.
That's a great point. And I don't want to totally derail you, but like you coming from, leading the marketing team efforts right now, and Chris is actually in the day-to-day coaching and managing his team. Those can feel really siloed, right? Like those are probably normally different reports, and you're looking at dashboard A in Salesforce and Chris is looking at dashboard B. Ambition is making that feel all connected. And to your point, I'm not going to mention the logo you're talking about, but like awesome logo that just converted that some people were like, I don't know, that's a long shot. And you saw it right when it hit Slack. It was because it was came inbound. You saw the rep who was working it. And then yesterday it flips to an opportunity. and you're like, told you so. This was us, and you're right there. And so like there was no waiting for the end of month pipeline review or some like end of week meeting. It was like all real time, tons of conversation happened, and it felt great.
Yeah. And traditionally, I feel like departments are siloed as it is, even if we're in office and now being out of office, like they can totally be siloed. But this has been great to like bring everybody together and keep everybody up to date.
Yeah, I do want to move on, but to end on, it was during this time, I think that Team Pipeline was officially formed, which was like the full collaboration of inbound and outbound to hit the larger number. I'm not going to say how much I paid to make myself a Team Pipeline sweatshirt. I was so hyped on it.
And now everyone's requesting, which you're an innovator, Mary.
It's great. This is a great look, probably one of our most, just full comprehensive look from meeting set for the month. Then it also looks at the smaller time frame for the week, and then how many of those, to Brian's point earlier, how many are qualifying? Like, are the meetings good? Are we setting trash meetings? How many dials did it take to get there, and how many sequenced activities? And so, Chris, if you could talk a little bit about why these are kind of like the core main metrics, how does it help you to see the dials alongside sequenced and, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the holy grail right here for the SDRs. On the far right, you can see the activities. So we're tracking their calls, sequenced activities. That's essentially emails and LinkedIn touches. And so in a real-time view here, we can see how are your activities contributing to meetings being set. So that's on the far left. And then how are those meetings set moving to pipeline, right? So that's the ultimate goal for the SDR. That's their monthly objective, is that qualified opportunities field. And so right here, we can kind of see what's your quantity on these numbers, on these activity numbers, and how is that turning into quality for, directly for the company. So this is a slide that gets a lot of use among the team and among the leadership as well.
Yeah. And on this next one, this one is one that I particularly love. It's some of the similar metrics, but I want to call out that we do track historical performance. And one cool thing that our scoreboard does is if you beat your performance of the previous period, it catches on fire, which is just fun and just part of like the culture that we want to create for teams. But where this actually comes into use is you can compare your performance over the previous month or maybe the previous year to see, those same metrics, but just a different look in the scoreboard. Like, are we besting ourselves, which I think is important too on the scoreboard.
Yeah. And before we leave the slide, one thing I wanted to say too is that with any of these slides, we can throw those in presentation mode. And for me as a manager, like, we've got so many meetings and stand-ups throughout the week, and I don't have to be creating a new PowerPoint for every meeting to relay these numbers to my team. I can quickly pull up the URL, put it in presentation mode, and there's how I run my meeting, right? So that's another great thing about these scoreboards.
Yeah, and this one, I couldn't find an example, but actually on the scoreboard too, to your point about meetings, our monthly meeting, we sometimes shout out birthdays and they all aggregate on here too. You can just have your birthdays right in line, which, it's maybe not important to everybody unless you're a culture person, which I think is just fun. Like, we do run the meetings. We actually use our own product. And I hate that there were no birthdays on there this right now, but the next one I want to show is, I thought this was really cool. What you did here, Chris, is, we can track performance to goal, but I love how you actually made a separate goal and broke out like, hey, if there's like a smaller sprint to go or a mini goal or a stretch goal, if you hit your goal, you can add that to your scoreboard and it keeps like the very immediate mission front and center for everybody. It's all, like we said, it's about focus. And so this is really great to me because it shows, hey, this is what we're going after, and it's very, very focused, kind of like a micro goal. And then there's like the real-time component. So if something moves to an opportunity, we know, everyone knows, oh, that's more pipeline into the goal. Like how, somebody pull up the scoreboard, where are we at on the goal, which I think is just fun, just really fun.
Yeah, I'd really quickly compliment, I think the way that Chris, you and Mark, manage and kind of, this isn't like rocket science, but I think you guys do a great job of doing exactly this. And I've seen it with our sales team too. Sales can be, especially right now, it's tough. The decision making is tough. There's sometimes more decision makers or people who need to get approval for something to happen. And we've seen our team be really creative about not only having their aggregate quota attainment or their aggregate, number of ops they want to create for the quarter or close one for the quarter, but then get really specific just like this and say, well, we were off or we're ahead of schedule or now we have a stretch. And so I'm going to make, like Mary said, this micro goal. I'm going to be communicating it about all the time, but I don't have to go, we used to call this, what do they call it? Gray reporting, where it was like people would have like their one-off spreadsheet and like no one could tell where it was or how we're doing or like what's the progress to it. And by utilizing something like this, it is front and center. It is hyper transparent. Everyone knows what we're doing. They know that we're setting the goal because of a stretch or we're off track or whatever, individual or team. And now it's like the focal point of what everyone's running toward. And people need that kind of like single point of direction, whether it's for them personally or for the team. And so I think that you and Mark specifically do a great job, and Mary, you do it with marketing too. But this example is a perfect thing that people could be doing right now, especially getting into the end of the year, right? Like however you're doing right now, you're either pushing for a little bit extra or you're getting like, how do we make up the delta with, whatever it is, 74 days left. This stuff is really powerful, and it's really important to make sure everyone's eyes are seeing the same message.
Yeah. And then, to your point about impacting the number, and what we talked about in the very beginning was kind of like in Salesforce, you can passively view the data or your CRM or wherever you're just looking at the big number. But we try to keep it really focused on mini goals, things along the way, so that you can actually impact the outcome. That's like the big, cornerstone of kind of what we do, is not just like aggregate the data for people, but we aggregate it in a way so that you can actually change it and impact the outcome. And so one of those things on like a micro goal was kind of outbound versus marketing here. I said I would call it out that this was the first, the competition just started on this one.
The last week, who can win the last week?
Yes. So I think, competing, our team's very competitive. I think sales by nature is, but marketing, I don't know, they may be more competitive than the sales team. And then in addition to that, we can broadcast leaderboards at any time in Slack. Anyone can drop it in. And it's so fun to, in the midst of a competition, especially on the smaller metrics, like drop leaderboards in when people are changing. And it's all about visibility. Like we can see what's happening. Leadership can see what's happening, but the reps are using it too to actually like push and stretch and change the culture around hitting targets, which I think is cool. On this one, the last thing I wanted to really call out is that we do also use percent to target for certain metrics. And so there's a lot of psychology around how when you visualize the end goal alongside progress toward that goal, it actually just drives intrinsic motivation to do more. And so that is something that we leverage too for different metrics and KPIs. You'll see in a couple others, but this is something where everyone's trying to get to 100, and you can view and sort not just by like the number, but percent to target, which is great too if you're doing cross-departmental or new hires, particularly onboarding people. You can make it universal. You can make the competition universal. You can make the data universal in a way by looking at how people are performing to target and not just like the raw numbers.
Yeah, I want to jump on that really quick, and maybe Chris, you were going to say something too, but not all of these folks have the same targets. I think there's different even sales processes in here, and so being able to, like you said, Mary, compare apples to oranges. One, it's great as a leader. I'm sure, Chris, you feel that. You're like, okay, who's exceeding their threshold, who's not? But it's also just helpful for the rep. It's like, am I doing the things I need to do? Am I going to be recognized for it? And is it abundantly clear? And do I have control over it? You said that earlier, Chris. Like, those are the things where I feel like you can take what we do and replicate it somewhere else tomorrow, because it's just about creating that kind of personal accountability and like tied to your own personal targets and objectives that make it really powerful for the rep, but also as a manager to use kind of as a lever to coach from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll take that one step further. I think another powerful piece of this for me as a manager is that when you can compare apples to oranges here with competitions, I can easily say, okay, my rep who has been doing this for a year and a half and has a different quota than everybody else can still compete and have a fair competition with someone who's onboarding and is only 4 weeks into the role. So that just really helps, make my life easier.
And I think another use case too, percent to target, we see sometimes is, customer success teams competing against sales teams, like different metrics, different KPIs, might be soliciting referrals or holding quarterly business reviews against dials and sequence. And so it's fun to cross-departmentally compete. And that's important too in like for remote teams, when the whole org is gone remote, I think. Lastly, again, this goes back. I know we're cutting short on time, so I'm just going to call it this too, is like a recurring competition. And that comes down to just impacting the number. We do things like coaching, of course, but then we also compete on things that we're getting close to hitting or that we want to change or that are like a micro focus. And so we keep that on the scoreboard always because it's a big part, of just the culture for our team. And so for this last little section here, that was kind of, again, our SDR scoreboard, what we use, those were our real metrics that we track and what we look at. And I wanted to go over quickly, Brian has created an org level executive dashboard. And this is because we track the full funnel of sales. So a little bit SDR, a little bit AE on here. And there's a couple different slide types. So I'll move quickly, but on this one, really wanted to showcase, it's another one of those full views, and it does contain percent to target, and just kind of wanted to hear what this stands out to you, Brian.
Well, there's a few things like throughout the different points of the month or quarter, like I want to know are most of the people going to get close to hitting their target? Like, and we do these sliders on a variety of time frames, but like, I probably do a lot less of having to coach or getting the opportunity even to coach people on the activity they're doing day to day. Like Chris does a great job of that, but I do really care, like, as we start thinking about more of the trend high level, are we creating enough pipeline this week, this month? Are we creating enough new opportunities over this period of time? And then I really want to make sure that everyone's contributing to it. So whether they're focused on outbound or inbound, enterprise, not enterprise, like, are they adding to it? And that gives me perspective on, like, as a unit, are we moving in the right direction? We're talking about sales development right here. Are we putting enough sales development pipeline into, the overall sales funnel? And the same thing for marketing. Are we creating enough inbound pipeline to get into the overall funnel? So I want to make sure that, on a recurring basis, like when we're talking about SDR here, like we're doing enough and the people are being successful with it. And if they're not being successful, like, that's an easy conversation then for Chris and I, because we're both on the same page. It's not a surprise ever.
And at that point, it's not a surprise to anyone because it is so visible across the organization. Great. This one, another look includes percent to target, kind of your activity score roll up. But this one is really cool because it's tracked at the daily level. And so it's just that look at what is everybody doing at home, what's who's dialing, who's setting appointments, who's emailing,
Yeah, Mary, you and I deal with this. You have a young teenager, like, who's playing Fortnite and who's booking meetings. Like, we used to know, and now we know again. And like that, I'm sure anyone who's on this call or who's going to watch the recording, you've got You've got any age people now who are working remotely, used to sit 8 feet 8 feet away like Chris does. Like, you knew how it was going, you knew what they were doing, you knew if the calls were landing or the emails were going out. I hate to say it, but now you just don't know. And so you don't have that pulse. And so I love this view that we utilize.
Yeah. And then I think pretty much I'm going to go ahead and fly through the rest of these because I know I want to leave time for questions. So I will have all of these in the recording email that we send out. And I do think that a couple questions came in, and so I want to just get to them. Someone asked, what do you use for blitz competition? So what KPIs do you typically blitz on, Chris, for the Tuesday and Thursdays?
Yeah, so we look at a number of different metrics and have different point totals for each of those. So calls are going to count. You're only going to get like 1 point for every call. A call connect is going to be worth 3 points. You know, the ultimate goal of those calls is to like get someone to pick up. So that's, we want to put more points there. We also look at talk time. So we're trying to incent, hey, ask that extra question. Don't give up after an objection, right? So we also track talk time. And then the last one is meeting set. So were you successful in getting the meeting set? And frankly, call blitzes are my favorite time of the week. We do it twice a week for 2 hours, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And, you know, it just helps create a really good routine for your team who, you know, is at home and you're not sure what they're doing. But you know exactly, you know, at Tuesday at 11, what they're going to be focused on. And my team knows that, you know, it takes 3 or 4 hours to prep for a blitz.
I love that you said that, Chris. What's the mentality of like getting into it?
Into the actual blitz?
Yeah, just because like you're probably, I don't want to stop you, but I think that the prep and like having people prepared, knowing that it's coming is really important versus like, hey, everyone hit the phones and just like throwing it up there.
Yeah, I mean, it is a competition. And so we really like say, you know, who's going to win this week and make that a big deal. And so each rep is making sure that they have enough calls lined up to fill a 2-hour block, which, you know, a lot of times is going to be around 80 or so calls. And so, so there's a lot of prospecting that has to happen before that. So it gets them in gear well before the blitz. And then also, like, so we start off the blitz, the first 15 minutes, we're all together. We're talking about, hey, you do have enough calls. Here's some objections we might encounter. And then we go away for the blitz and then come back 15 minutes after it's over and discuss how it went. If any meetings were set, we'll actually listen to those calls together. So it's just a fun way of, hey, we got to get this work done. Let's create some competition around it.
And go ahead, Brian.
Well, 2 questions came in, and I think it's really worth, Chris, you talking about it. Terry asked, could you explain like why you track call connects and why you track talk time?
Yeah. So, you know, there's some things you can't control about somebody picking up the phone, but there are some things you can control. You know, we talk to our reps about like what time of the day you're calling people. You know, if you're calling at, you know, usual hours when people are in meetings, your connect rate's going to go down. So it's really important for us to track how often do you get a direct line? How often do you actually get that conversation with somebody? That also signals to me, like, how is our data? Like, do we need to get better direct dial information, stuff like that? So that's why it's important for me. Talk time really speaks to how artful you are on the phone. You know, are you quickly making someone feel comfortable that wants to talk to you? Are you quickly being bucketed as another sales guy who, you know, I'm going to hang up on? And so, yeah, so that's a reason for the talk time.
One thing I want to add too, because I am, there's a ton of content on the Ambition blog around efficiency metrics. And so one thing for me is to really, when people look at the ratio of dials to meetings set, I always want to just go back and say, no, look at connects to meeting set. It's such a different picture of who's actually got, the best pitch and things versus the call to meetings ratio. So when you're looking at measuring some efficiency things, it's important too.
Yeah. That's what I often look at. Connect. So connect to meeting set ratio, because that tells me how skillful are you on the phone. Yeah.
And I think another question came in, Brian, that I'm going to send your way. Do you find that you still use Salesforce dashboards? Or are you measuring everything in Ambition?
It's a great question. I hope there's no Salesforce people on this, but I can't think of the last time I looked at a Salesforce dashboard. I just don't go refresh them. We have really smart Salesforce people in our team, and like they've built cool dashboards, but like I don't need it. I guess there are things in Salesforce I go look at. Like by all means, I go look at like opportunity level data there. Like I'll go look and see what's happening with an account. But if I'm thinking about our team's performance, I'm almost exclusively looking at Ambition, and even things down like we dog food a lot of our own stuff. So what I care about a lot of times is like where are we to different goals or initiatives in the company, whether it's sales development, enterprise sales, mid-market sales, how we're doing on pipeline generation. And so, whether it's some of the scoreboards that Mary showed earlier, or it's in like our goals or kind of our insights tab, that's where I'm going really quickly, because I know that I have saved reports on most of those or already built out goals that tell me exactly what I want to know. So I guess I do still look at some Salesforce stuff, but not for any type of performance tracking or kind of momentum of how our team is doing.
Cool. And then I think there was a question, Chris, about do our teams inbound or just outbound, or it's both, but do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've got 5 dedicated outbound reps and then 1 inbound rep. There is the occasional crossover where an outbound rep has been working something that comes inbound and that gets passed to them. But yeah, our 5 outbound reps are pretty much just focused on cold outreach.
I think that we're about at time. And so I am going to wrap it up. If anyone has any questions, definitely reach out to us. Customers can find, our support team, get help at Ambition. Anybody come on to the website and come on through contact. We'd love to talk to you, and we'll send out the recording and a follow-up soon. But thank you guys for joining me.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
See you guys.